Imagine that your body is not merely flesh and bone, but a vast archive, a hidden library of stories written in a language so old that even the oldest civilizations could not have imagined it. This library lies deep within every cell, wound tightly into the spirals of DNA, and if we were to open its pages, we would not only find the instructions that make you, you, we would also discover echoes of beings long vanished from the earth. Close your eyes and picture this. Tens of thousands of years ago, the world was not empty, and humanity was not alone. Our ancestors, Homo sapiens, were not the only humans walking the plains, hunting in the forests, or gazing up at the stars with questions they could not yet name. Side by side with us were others, the broad-browed Neanderthals of Europe, the mysterious Denisovans of Asia, and still others whose very names have only recently been whispered into existence through fossil fragments. Most of them are gone now, their bones turned to dust, their voices silenced, their homes forgotten under ice and soil. Yet, in a strange, almost ghostly way, they are still here. Their signatures remain within you, inside your very blood, inside the spirals of your genetic code. When scientists like Spencer Wells, in his book The Journey of Man, 2003, began to unravel these genetic mysteries, they discovered that we are not pure descendants of a single line, not a straight path from ape to modern human. Instead, we are mosaics, patchwork beings made from countless encounters and unions that occurred under ancient skies. Every time a sapiens met a Neanderthal in a hidden valley, or shared firelight with a Denisovan in the shadow of a mountain, or perhaps looked into the eyes of a smaller, strange cousin like Homo floresiensis on an island shore, something more than a meeting took place. Sometimes they fought, yes, but sometimes they loved, and sometimes they shared more than stories. Genes passed from one to another, braided together in ways that still live within us. When you look into a mirror tonight, you will see only yourself. But within the invisible depth of your DNA, you carry faint reflections of these others. Perhaps a gene from a Neanderthal ancestor strengthens your immune system. Perhaps a fragment from a Denisovan allows you to breathe more easily in high mountains. You cannot see them, but they are there, hidden but enduring, like shadows stitched into the fabric of your being. We often call them extinct, the lost children of humanity, but perhaps that word is not quite right. For how can they be extinct when they still whisper in your blood? When their voices still echo in your cells? When their survival is written into your very breath? The fire of humanity was never ours alone to carry. It was passed from many hands, and though some hands slipped away, their warmth still glows inside us.
Now imagine the world as it once was. Not the world of glittering cities or glowing screens, but a raw and untamed planet, vast and wild, where ice sheets crawled across continents and forests grew thick with shadows. The air was sharper then, colder, the stars above brighter, and on the ground below walked more than one kind of human. In Europe, Neanderthals moved with heavy steps, broad faces lit by the flicker of fire, their voices rumbling in deep tones that would seem both strange and familiar to our ears. In Asia, a people we now call Denisovans carved out their lives, leaving almost nothing behind but a fragment of bone and a single tooth buried in the frozen soil of Siberia. On distant islands far to the south, tiny humans no taller than a child, Homo floresiensis, hunted small game and left behind tools like delicate whispers carved from stone. For millennia, our world was a crowded stage, a theater of human variety where no one species held dominance for long. And yet, when we look around today, only one remains. Us, Homo sapiens. What happened to the others?
Why do we call them extinct while we sit here, alive, breathing, telling their story? Scientists piecing together this puzzle have uncovered a truth more complex than conquest. Our survival was not simply the triumph of strength or intelligence, but a weaving together of many threads. The genetic studies that followed the discoveries in Denisova Cave in 2010 revealed something astonishing. Up to 5% of the DNA of modern Melanesians and Tibetans can be traced back to Denisovans. Neanderthal DNA, too, lives on in almost everyone outside of Africa. This means we did not only replace them, we absorbed them. We carry them like silent passengers, woven into us so deeply that without them, we would not be the same. Close your eyes and imagine those meetings long ago. A sapiens woman looks into the eyes of a Neanderthal man across a firelit cave. A Denisovan child runs alongside a group of sapiens children on a high plateau, their laughter echoing in the thin air. These were not myths or legends. They happened, and they changed us forever. The evidence lies not in carvings or cave art, but in your very cells. When you breathe at high altitudes, when your body fights off a virus, when you dream strange dreams, you may be hearing the faint echoes of them, the voices of forgotten cousins who are still here, still alive within you. It makes you wonder. Perhaps extinction is not the right word. Perhaps their disappearance was only from sight, not from existence. They vanished from the world we can see, but they continue in the world we carry inside.
Picture yourself sitting beside a great fire under the open sky of the Ice Age, the stars above like icy lanterns glowing in the blackness. Around the fire, you are not alone. To your left sits a Homo sapiens woman, her eyes alive with imagination, perhaps sketching shapes into the dirt that could one day become art. To your right, a Neanderthal man, his face rugged and strong, his heavy brow casting shadows in the glow, yet his hands carefully shaping stone tools with quiet patience. Across from you, perhaps a Denisovan, broad and silent, gazing into the flames as if holding secrets of mountains no one else could survive. And at the edge of the circle, small figures, Homo floresiensis, move with quick, agile steps, their laughter sharp and high, like children playing, though they are a people of their own. This was the world once, not a world of one humanity, but a gathering, a chorus of voices. And yet, when the fire burns low and the night grows colder, you notice something. One by one, their shadows begin to fade. The Denisovan turns to mist, leaving only the echo of his breath in the thin mountain air. The Neanderthal's strong hands vanish, though the tools he shaped still remain scattered in the dust. The small hobbits retreat into darkness, leaving only footprints on an island shore. And at last, when you look again, you realize only one figure is left by the fire: you. This is not just imagination. This is history. The archaeologist Ian Tattersall once wrote in Extinct Humans, 2001, that the human story is not about a ladder of progress, but about a bush of diversity with many branches cut short. When we call the others extinct, we speak as though they are gone, but the truth is stranger. They live in us, hidden in the twists of DNA, waiting for us to remember their names. Every breath you take carries traces of the highlands where Denisovans thrived. Every defense your body mounts against illness carries strategies inherited from Neanderthals. Even the way we imagine, the way we tell stories, may come from the mixture of voices long silenced. And so the question lingers in the air, haunting yet irresistible. If their whispers are still inside us, if their blood still flows in our veins, then can we truly say they are gone? Or are they only waiting just beneath the surface for us to listen more closely to the echoes of who we really are? High in the all-time mountains of Siberia lies a cave that seems ordinary at first glance. Its entrance is dark, its walls cold with the breath of ice that lingers even in summer, and the ground is littered with fragments of stone and bone. For thousands of years, travelers passed by without knowing that this hollow in the rock guarded one of the greatest secrets of humanity. It was not until the year 2008 that the world's story shifted inside this cave. Archaeologists, digging carefully through the layers of soil, uncovered what seemed like an unremarkable fragment, a piece of a finger bone, small and fragile, belonging to a young girl who lived more than 50,000 years ago. They called the place Denisova Cave, named after a hermit who once lived there centuries before. At first, the discovery didn't seem extraordinary. After all, bones had been found in caves before, belonging to Neanderthals, to Homo sapiens, to animals long gone. But when scientists placed the fragment under the scrutiny of genetic sequencing, what they found shook the foundations of our understanding. This bone did not belong to Neanderthals, nor did it belong to us, Homo sapiens. It was something else entirely, an unknown human group preserved in a single fingertip. When Svante Pago and his team published their groundbreaking findings in Nature 2010, the world met the Denisovans for the very first time. Imagine the shock. An entire people, forgotten, erased by time, suddenly returned to the world not through legend or fossilized skulls, but through the code of life itself. This girl, long dead, had whispered her existence across millennia through her DNA, and in doing so, she reminded us that our story was not finished, that the human family was larger and stranger than we ever imagined. Picture holding that tiny fragment in your hand, a sliver of bone no bigger than a coin, yet carrying within it the legacy of a whole people. How many such bones lie buried in the earth, waiting, silent and unseen? How many lost voices wait for us to listen? The Denisovan Discovery was not just about science, it was about humility. For every time we believe we know the full story of humanity, the earth reminds us that entire chapters still lie hidden in the dirt beneath our feet.
When we try to imagine the Denisovans, we face an extraordinary challenge. Almost nothing of their bodies has survived. Unlike the Neanderthals, who left behind skulls and skeletons that allow us to see their heavy brows and powerful frames, the Denisovans have left us only fragments. One finger bone, a tooth, a few scraps of long bone. And yet, through the magic of DNA, those fragments unfold into a vision of a people who lived, thrived, and adapted to some of the harshest environments on Earth. Close your eyes and picture the Altai Mountains 50,000 years ago. The air is thin and cold, biting at the lungs. Snow lies heavy across the peaks, and the forests below are filled with mammoth, woolly rhino, and the roar of cave lions. In this frozen landscape, Denisovans lit their fires and sheltered in caves. Their bodies, though we cannot reconstruct them fully, must have been powerful to survive here. Genetic evidence suggests they were closely related to Neanderthals, perhaps sharing their broad faces and muscular builds, but they were not identical. The secrets of their adaptation are written in the DNA they passed on to us. For example, studies published in Nature, Huerta Sanchez et al. 2014, revealed that Tibetans today carry a gene variant inherited from Denisovans that allows them to thrive in high altitudes where oxygen is scarce. Imagine that! A ghost people,
long vanished, still helping humans breathe on the roof of the world. The Denisovans, though invisible to our eyes, still shape the lives of millions who have never even heard their name. This is what makes them so haunting. We cannot see their faces, yet we know their fingerprints are on us. Archaeologists find stone tools in Denisova cave, but they cannot yet say with certainty which belong to sapiens, which to Neanderthals, and which to Denisovans. It is as if their voices are tangled together in the soil, refusing to separate. And perhaps that is the truth of who they were. Not isolated figures, but people who lived and mingled, who shared not only tools, but bloodlines. If you imagine them now, picture a figure standing at the mouth of the cave, wrapped in animal hides, gazing out across the snowfields of Siberia. Their face is a mystery, but their breath clouds the air just as ours would. Their children laugh, their hunters track prey, their families huddle against the cold. They were as real as we are, and though the earth has erased their bodies, their presence lingers in the very air we breathe, in the genes that flow through our veins. It is as if they are shadows at the edge of our campfire, visible only when we remember to look for them.
What makes the Denisovans so haunting is not only their discovery, but the silence that surrounds them. Unlike the Neanderthals, we cannot study their skulls and imagine the faces that looked out over Ice Age Europe. Unlike sapiens, they left behind no art, no carved ivory figurines or painted caves to whisper their dreams across time. All we have are traces, genetic echoes, scattered bones, a few tools that may or may not have been theirs. And yet those traces are enough to tell us something astonishing. The Denisovans were not just survivors of their own harsh world, they were contributors to ours. They gave us genes that help us live at high altitudes, genes that influence our immune systems, perhaps even traits we do not yet fully understand. It is as though they reached across time, gifting pieces of themselves so that we, their distant cousins, might carry their legacy into the future. Imagine again standing at the entrance of Denisova Cave. Behind you lies darkness, the bones of the girl who died 50,000 years ago, the dust of generations forgotten. Before you stretches a world vast and untamed, a world they once walked with confidence. Somewhere in the snowfields, their voices are gone, yet in your chest, their breath still lingers. It is a paradox. They are extinct, yet not gone. They are invisible, yet alive within us. The geneticist David Reich, in his book Who We Are and How We Got Here, 2018, described the discovery of Denisovans as a revelation that shattered the simple picture of human evolution. Instead of a straight line from primitive to modern, our story is a braided river with currents that twist and join, some fading into the ground, others flowing strongly into the present. The Denisovans are one of those hidden currents, unseen on the surface but essential to the river's course. To think that a single child's finger bone could rewrite history is both humbling and electrifying. How many more forgotten peoples lie beneath the earth, their stories untold, their genes waiting to be heard? If Denisova Cave held the ghost of one lost population, what other caves, what other soils, what other seas still hold the remains of children we have never known? Families whose blood is still part of our own. The Denisovans remind us that history is never finished, that our family tree has more branches than we dare imagine, and that extinction does not always mean disappearance. They challenge us with a question that cannot be ignored. If the shadows of forgotten ancestors still walk with us in our veins, then what does it truly mean to say they are gone?
Close your eyes and try to imagine a face that no one in history has ever seen. With Neanderthals, we can at least picture them, broad foreheads, heavy brow ridges, strong jaws, and sturdy frames. With Homo sapiens, of course, we see ourselves in every mirror. But the Denisovans remain ghosts. They have left us no full skulls, no jawbones to frame a mouth, not even a brow ridge to cast a shadow. All we know comes from fragments: a finger bone, a tooth, a few scraps of genetic code carefully coaxed from the soil of a Siberian cave. And yet, through those fragments, we begin to shape an outline of who they might have been. In 2019, researchers at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem used genetic data to attempt something extraordinary: reconstructing the face of a Denisovan, not from bone, but from DNA. Their study, published in Cell, Murray et al. 2019, suggested that Denisovans likely shared some features with Neanderthals: broad skulls, strong builds, but also carried their own unique traits. Perhaps their jaws were wider, their noses broader, adaptations to the cold, high-altitude environments where they thrived. Imagine standing in front of one now, their skin weathered by ice winds, their eyes steady and unyielding, their breath clouding in the thin mountain air. You would recognize them as human, yet different, familiar, yet unsettling. They would not look like monsters or beasts, but like cousins whose faces echo ours in strange and surprising ways. And this is where the story becomes haunting. We can reconstruct their genome. We can sketch their possible features, but we cannot know their smiles, their laughter, the light in their eyes. Their faces, the most human part of them, are lost to time. In that absence, they become something even more mysterious, a reminder that for all our science, the past will always hold secrets that cannot be fully uncovered.
Imagine a sculptor trying to carve a portrait of someone they have never seen, guided only by whispers and shadows. That is what scientists face with the Denisovans. With Neanderthals, entire skeletons allow us to rebuild their bodies in clay and bone, letting us look into the eyes of beings who lived 40,000 years ago. But the Denisovans are far more elusive. The fragments we have, the girl's finger bone, a massive molar tooth, and later a jawbone found on the Tibetan plateau, offer only hints, not answers. The Tibetan jawbone, discovered in Baisha Karst Cave and dated to over 160,000 years ago, was a revelation. When analyzed, its shape did not match Neanderthals or sapiens, but its protein markers revealed a Denisovan signature. Suddenly we knew they had lived not just in Siberia, but on the roof of the world, enduring thin air and brutal cold, centuries before sapiens ever dared to climb so high. But still the question remained, what did they look like? That's where genetic reconstruction stepped in. Scientists used ancient DNA to predict traits in their faces: broad skulls, wide jaws, perhaps flatter noses, adaptations that mirrored their environments. In a sense, DNA became the chisel that carved their portrait. And yet, even with this knowledge, we cannot draw them with certainty. Were their eyes lighter or darker than ours? Did their hair curl in the cold winds or hang straight and heavy like obsidian strands? Did they carry scars from hunts or paint their faces with ochre, as sapiens sometimes did? We can only speculate. Picture walking into a museum where an artist has sculpted a Denisovan based on these predictions. You stare into their face. It looks human, but something in the proportions unsettles you. It feels like looking into a dream where the familiar has been bent slightly out of place. And maybe that's fitting, because Denisovans belong to that realm between memory and forgetting,
between science and imagination. Their faces, reconstructed from invisible codes, remind us that we live surrounded by the ghosts of people we never truly knew, yet whose blood flows within us even today.
What lingers most about the Denisovans is not what we know, but what we cannot see. Their faces remain hidden, veiled by time, leaving us to wonder how they might have looked if we met them on a snowy ridge or by the firelight of a cave. Perhaps they would have seemed almost like us, close enough to spark recognition, yet different enough to remind us of the distance carved by evolution. This absence is powerful, because faces are the essence of humanity. They are where identity lives. Our emotions, our thoughts, our unspoken stories all flicker across them. Without a Denisovan face, their memory feels incomplete, like a song with missing notes. And yet, perhaps this is why their mystery grips us so tightly. They cannot be reduced to a museum display, frozen under glass. They resist being pinned down, as if guarding their secret across eternity. Think of it this way. Every time we meet someone new, our brain maps their face instantly. Recognition, empathy, trust all begin with that simple act of seeing. With Denisovans, we are denied that chance. We cannot look into their eyes, cannot trace the lines of their smiles or their frowns, and so they become both alien and intimate. Shadows whose blood still runs within us, yet whose faces we will never greet. This paradox is what makes them unforgettable. In his book Sapiens, 2014, Yuval Noah Harari reminds us that history is not just about the victors, but about the forgotten, the countless lives erased without a trace. Denisovans embody that truth. They are proof that entire branches of our human family can vanish, leaving behind only whispers. And yet, unlike so many who disappeared, their whispers speak through our very cells. Every breath taken by a Tibetan shepherd at high altitude carries their legacy. Every heartbeat in certain populations across Asia and Oceania pulses with their genetic gifts. It is as if the Denisovans are still here, not in body, but in the unseen architecture of life itself. And maybe, just maybe, that is why we never saw their faces, because their true legacy was not meant to be remembered in stone, but lived in flesh. When you think of them now, imagine not the absence of a face, but the presence of a shadow, standing just behind your reflection in the mirror. You cannot name them, cannot greet them, but they are there. And in that silence, in that unfinished image, they achieve something greater than recognition. They become eternal.
The story of humanity is not just about survival. It is also about connection. When Homo sapiens spread out of Africa tens of thousands of years ago, they did not walk into an empty world. They stepped into lands already peopled by Neanderthals in Europe and Western Asia, and by Denisovans farther east. For a long time, scientists assumed that these encounters must have been violent, brutal struggles for territory and dominance. But DNA tells a different, far more complicated story. Instead of complete separation, there were moments of intimacy, bloodlines that crossed, children born from encounters between different human kinds. In 2018, a remarkable discovery shook the world of paleoanthropology. Within the Denisova cave itself, researchers found the bone fragment of a teenage girl. When her DNA was studied, it revealed something extraordinary. She was the direct child of a Neanderthal mother and a Denisovan father.
Published in Nature, Sloan et al. 2018, this finding proved that interbreeding was not a rare accident, but a reality of prehistoric life. Imagine the scene, a Denisovan campfire flickering against the cave walls, a Neanderthal woman sitting nearby, their child asleep in her arms, carrying within her body the union of two entire worlds. This child did not live long, but her existence echoes across millennia. It tells us that these groups did not only fight, they also shared, bonded, and created new futures together. And through these unions, pieces of Denisovan and Neanderthal heritage were carried forward, stitched into the genetic fabric of Homo sapiens. Today, most people outside of Africa carry between 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA, and populations in parts of Asia and Oceania carry an additional 3 to 6% Denisovan DNA. These numbers may sound small, but they are vast when you consider that billions of living humans are, in a sense, living archives of these lost peoples. Every time you breathe, laugh, or dream, echoes of them stir within you. Their blood may have disappeared from the earth, but their legacy lives in the rhythm of our own hearts. What does it mean to know that inside your body lies the memory of cousins long extinct? Perhaps it means that extinction is not always an ending. Sometimes it is a transformation.
When we think of inheritance, we often imagine heirlooms, jewelry passed down, stories whispered from grandparents, traditions carried across centuries. But the Denisovans left us no carvings, no monuments, no stories etched in stone. Instead, they left something far more intimate, their DNA, hidden deep in the folds of our chromosomes. For certain peoples of Asia and Oceania, this inheritance is not abstract. It shapes the way their bodies work, even today. One of the most famous examples is found among the Tibetan people, who thrive in some of the harshest environments on Earth. At altitudes where oxygen levels drop to dangerous lows, their bodies function as if they were at sea level. For decades, scientists wondered how this was possible. The answer, revealed through genetics, was Denisovan DNA. A gene called EPAS1, carried by modern Tibetans, traces directly back to Denisovan ancestors. This gene helps regulate oxygen in the blood, allowing survival in the thin air of the Himalayas. Without Denisovan inheritance, the very existence of Tibetan culture, perched on the rooftop of the world, might not have been possible. But the story does not end there. In parts of Southeast Asia, Denisovan DNA is linked to immune system adaptations, helping populations resist diseases that once ravaged early human communities. In Oceania, where people may carry up to 5% Denisovan ancestry, these genetic gifts influence not only physiology, but perhaps even subtle aspects of how bodies respond to their environment. Imagine that, a people long gone, still shaping the rhythm of breaths taken at high mountain passes, still protecting the immune defenses of a newborn child, still living inside us in ways we cannot fully grasp. As Svante Pääbo, who won the 2022 Nobel Prize for his work on ancient DNA, explains in Neanderthal Man 2014, the discovery of Denisovan DNA was not just about science, it was about rediscovering family. He describes it as opening a door we didn't know existed, revealing that the story of Homo sapiens was never ours alone. The Denisovans were not erased completely. They endure, coded into life itself. And so when we speak of their extinction, we must speak carefully.
They may no longer walk the earth in flesh, but they breathe in us still, in every adaptation that allows us to thrive. Their whispers are in our blood, guiding us unknowingly through the present. To call them gone would be to ignore the truth that they are part of us, inseparable, eternal.
There is something haunting about knowing that your body is not entirely your own, that within your cells lies the echo of lives long gone. The Denisovans did not leave us tools scattered in the mud, nor paintings on cave walls, nor monuments to catch the rising sun. What they left instead is far more enduring, themselves, hidden in the double helix of our DNA. And in this strange way, their extinction is not absolute. Imagine sitting by a fire, staring into the flames, and realizing that you are not just yourself. You are also fragments of forgotten people woven into your blood. Every breath taken by a Tibetan shepherd on the icy slopes of the Himalayas, every child born in the islands of Melanesia, every person in Asia whose immune system carries ancient defenses, all of them are living testimony that Denisovans never fully disappeared. They became us. Their story did not end with silence in the cave. It continued in whispers inside sapiens' bodies, carried forward unknowingly through time. This makes their extinction feel less like a disappearance and more like a transformation. They dissolved into us, not as ghosts fading into the dark, but as sparks that became part of a larger fire. And here lies the paradox. We can mourn their absence while also recognizing that their survival strategy was unlike any other. They chose us, or perhaps nature chose for them. They left no tribe standing, no kingdom remembered, yet their bloodlines flow stronger than any dynasty. As anthropologist David Reich notes in Who We Are and How We Got Here, 2018, modern humans are not purebred beings, but mosaics, shaped by countless interminglings. We are, quite literally, the children of many. And so the Denisovans are not gone. They are in your pulse, in your bones, in the rhythm of your lungs. The next time you look into a mirror, imagine another face standing just behind yours, unseen but real, watching through your eyes. That is the Denisovan presence, silent, eternal, a reminder that humanity was never just one story, but many threads woven into one fabric. Perhaps that is the greatest echo of all, that even in extinction, they found immortality.
When we imagine ancient humans, we often think in fragments, a tool here, a campfire there, a few bones in the dust. But what if the Denisovans were more than just shadows on the edge of sapiens history? What if they built something, communities, traditions, maybe even forgotten kingdoms that time has swallowed whole? The truth is, we will likely never know the full extent of their world. Yet the little evidence we do have hints at complexity. In the Denisova cave, archaeologists uncovered not only bones, but also finely crafted ornaments, bracelets made of chlorite, drilled with tiny holes that required advanced techniques. One particular bracelet, polished to a sheen and thought to be at least 40,000 years old, shows precision drilling that astonished scientists. It suggests that Denisovans were not merely surviving, they were creating, decorating, perhaps even celebrating. Think of that for a moment. In the darkness of Siberia, where winters are long and merciless, Denisovan hands carved beauty into stone. This was not the act of a people clinging desperately to existence. It was the act of a people who had time to dream. Archaeologist Anatoly Derevyanko, who has studied the cave extensively, describes these artifacts as evidence of symbolic thought, an ability once believed to belong only to Homo sapiens. If Denisovans could shape beauty, if they could craft meaning into objects, then their world must have been richer than we imagine. Picture a settlement in the Altai Mountains, sturdy shelters built against the cold, children laughing near fires, elders shaping ornaments to mark stories or status. They might not have had cities, but they could have had cultures, identities, and connections that bound them together. And if they had the skills to carve stone so precisely, who is to say they didn't also weave myths, songs, or rituals that have been lost to the winds of time? What we call extinction might better be thought of as erasure, eras written out of the human story, waiting for us to uncover them.
When scientists mapped Denisovan DNA, they found something astonishing. It was scattered like breadcrumbs across a vast landscape, from the icy peaks of Siberia to the tropical forests of Southeast Asia, and even into the bloodlines of island peoples far out in the Pacific. This distribution suggests that Denisovans were not a single isolated band clinging to one cave, but rather a widespread and diverse population adapted to dramatically different worlds. Imagine them not as ghosts confined to Siberia, but as explorers who carved out territories across half a continent. In the mountains of Tibet, their descendants carried the genes that allow humans to thrive where the air is thin and cold. In the jungles of Indonesia and Papua, echoes of their DNA linger in the bodies of modern people, proof that Denisovans once walked there too. These clues suggest something tantalizing. They may have formed interconnected groups, like small kingdoms of kin, each adapted to its unique environment. Some may have traded tools or ornaments. Some may have intermarried with Neanderthals or Homo sapiens passing through. And others may have lived in isolation, thriving in worlds we will never fully reconstruct. Anthropologist David Reich, in Who We Are and How We Got Here, 2018, notes that Denisovan DNA varies so widely across modern populations that it is almost as if there were multiple Denisovan subgroups, each with their own evolutionary story. If this is true, then we are not speaking of a single forgotten people, but perhaps entire forgotten nations, spread across Asia like constellations that no one recorded. Picture this. Along a river in what is now Southeast Asia, a Denisovan clan builds shelters of wood and palm, their children playing in the humid air. Thousands of miles away, in the frozen expanse of Siberia, another group huddles around fires, wrapping themselves in furs, their artisans polishing stone bracelets that will outlast their names. Between them may have stretched landscapes of silence, but within each enclave there was life, rhythms, languages, rituals. To call them primitive would be to miss the point. They adapted not only to survive, but to belong, weaving themselves into environments as varied as the ocean islands and the roof of the world. If that is not a kind of kingdom, then what is? Not a kingdom of walls and crowns, but of survival, diversity, and endurance, an empire of forgotten bloodlines. And though no map will ever chart their realms, their legacy is etched inside us, hidden in every heartbeat of those who carry their genes.
Close your eyes and picture the world not as it is, but as it could have been. Imagine that the Denisovans did not vanish into the mists of prehistory, but endured, their forgotten kingdoms still thriving beside us. Perhaps high in the Himalayas, where the air is too thin for ordinary humans, their settlements would gleam with fires visible against the night sky, their people moving effortlessly in the altitude that we still struggle to endure. Perhaps deep in the rainforests of Indonesia, their voices would echo with songs we have never heard,
weaving myths of the mountains and seas into rituals passed down for millennia. Along the frozen steppes of Siberia, clans might gather in vast wooden halls, decorated with ornaments of stone and bone, retelling the stories of ancestors who first taught them to harness fire. And in the Pacific Islands, where the ocean stretches endlessly, Denisovan navigators might sail across horizons with knowledge of currents and stars so precise it would rival anything built by later civilizations. If they had survived, we would not think of humanity as one story, but as many. Sapiens beside Denisovans, two branches of the same tree growing side by side. The very word human might mean something larger, broader, more layered than it does today. Think of the art they might have made, the languages they might have spoken, the philosophies they might have pondered beneath the same stars we gaze at now. Instead, their world ended quietly, their voices silenced, their lands emptied, their names erased. Yet, in imagining this alternate history, we begin to feel the weight of what was lost. The Denisovans are not simply an extinct cousin. They are a missing chapter of humanity, a story half told. Anthropologist Chris Stringer, in The Origin of Our Species, 2011, notes that when we uncover fragments of Denisovan DNA, we are glimpsing not only biological traces, but cultural ghosts, the shadows of civilizations that might have been. To think that their ornaments and tools are all we have left is heartbreaking, because it means whole worlds collapsed into silence before they could be remembered. And yet, in this sorrow, there is wonder. Perhaps their kingdoms did not vanish completely, but live on invisibly inside us. Each breath at high altitude, each immune system response sharpened by ancient DNA, each whisper of their blood in our veins. These are the kingdoms that survived, unseen but enduring. So we are left with a haunting question. If their kingdoms had lived, would we still rule the earth alone, or would we share it with a people who look back at us as brothers?
When we think of the past, we usually picture ruins, bones, or broken tools lying silent in the earth. But there is another archive, an invisible library carried inside us, written in every cell of our bodies. Our DNA is a time capsule, preserving whispers of encounters that happened tens of thousands of years ago. And when scientists cracked it open, they discovered something remarkable: the shadows of Denisovans, still living in us. It was not just a trace, not just a faint memory. In some populations, as much as 5% of the genome comes from these forgotten ancestors. That might sound small, but consider what it means. Every cell in those people's bodies, every beat of their hearts, every breath they take, it is all shaped by Denisovan inheritance. In places like Papua New Guinea, the Philippines, and Melanesia, this ancestry is not a dusty footnote, but a daily presence, sculpting the way bodies adapt to their environments. And it's not only in far-flung islands. Even in parts of Asia, Denisovan DNA influences immune responses, blood oxygen levels, and other traits that help humans thrive where they otherwise might not. Geneticist Svante Pabo, in his groundbreaking book, Neanderthal Man, 2014, described the discovery as like opening a forbidden door. Behind that door was not a strange and alien species, but family, kin whose blood still runs in ours. To realize that humanity is not pure, never was pure, but instead a mosaic stitched together by countless unions, is to realize that identity itself is more complicated than we ever imagined. We are not only sapiens, we are echoes of Neanderthals, Denisovans, and perhaps even other ancient people still waiting to be discovered.
This truth forces us to see ourselves differently, not as the sole survivors of a contest, but as children of many mothers, carriers of many stories. And it is in this shadowed DNA that Denisovans live on, neither fully gone nor fully present. A reminder that extinction does not always mean erasure. Sometimes it means transformation.
The discovery of Denisovan DNA was nothing short of a revolution in science. For decades, archaeologists believed we could only know the past through what we dug up: bones, tools, paintings, the silent remains of vanished lives. But when a tiny fragment of bone from Denisova Cave was sequenced in 2010, the story of humanity cracked open in ways no one had expected. That single sliver, no larger than a pinky nail, contained an entire genetic library. Within its spirals were pages of history that told us Denisovans were not just a Siberian mystery, but a people who had once spread far and wide, leaving traces across continents. It was as if scientists had turned on a light in a darkened room and suddenly saw that we were not alone in our ancestry. The work was pioneered by Svante Pääbo and his team at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology, whose research earned him the 2022 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine. They developed techniques to extract and sequence DNA so degraded by time that most had thought it impossible. Every strand of recovered code was like listening to a whisper across 40,000 years. And those whispers told us that modern humans carry within them echoes of Denisovans. To put it in perspective, when a child in New Guinea takes a breath on a mountain ridge, her ability to absorb oxygen at high altitude may come directly from a Denisovan gene passed down through countless generations. When someone in Southeast Asia survives a viral outbreak thanks to a stronger immune response, part of that resilience may come from Denisovan inheritance. This isn't mythology, it is science, hardwired into our biology. What makes it even more astonishing is that the Denisovans themselves remain nearly invisible. We have fewer than a handful of their fossils: a jawbone found on the Tibetan plateau, teeth that seem far too large for sapiens, and fragments from Denisova Cave. Yet from these scraps, their entire legacy has been unveiled. It's like finding only a few bricks of a lost city, but then realizing the city itself still lives inside you. That is the power of DNA. It preserves stories the Earth alone cannot. And as geneticist David Reich wrote in Who We Are and How We Got Here, 2018, every time we sequence DNA from a fossil, we open a new window into human history, one that often overturns everything we thought we knew. The Denisovans are the perfect example, a people we barely met in the dirt, but who live on inside our very skin.
What does it mean to know that inside us lives the blood of another people, a people whose faces we will never truly see? This is the haunting gift of Denisovan DNA. It tells us that humanity was never a straight line, never a single march of sapiens toward dominance, but a tangled forest of lives, loves, and encounters that reshaped us into what we are today. To carry Denisovan genes is to carry their victories and struggles, their triumphs against hostile climates, their survival through ice ages, their courage in landscapes where even fire seemed fragile. Their DNA did not vanish when their bodies did. It found refuge in us. In some sense, they are not gone at all. When a climber ascends to the thin air peaks of Tibet and breathes where others would collapse, Denisovans breathe with her. When a child in Oceania thrives in the humid heat of the tropics, the Denisovans are there too, encoded in resilience, written into survival.
Anthropologist Chris Stringer, in The Origin of Our Species, 2011, argues that this genetic inheritance forces us to redefine who we are, not as the singular, wise species, but as a chorus of ancient humans still singing inside us. It means that identity is not purity, but mixture, not isolation, but connection. We are not only Homo sapiens, we are Neanderthal in part, Denisovan in part, and perhaps still a little of others we have not yet discovered. Imagine standing before a mirror and realizing that your reflection is not just yours, but the culmination of countless lives. Denisovans never wrote their names, never carved their myths in stone walls that survived. Yet their legacy is etched deeper than any monument could endure. It is etched into chromosomes, into the cells that divide, into the breath you take right now. That realization is humbling. It breaks the illusion of human supremacy, reminding us that we stand not alone at the summit of evolution, but on the bones and blood of kin we barely acknowledge. And perhaps in a way, it also redeems their extinction. They are not forgotten. They are not erased. They live in us, in every heartbeat that carries a Denisovan echo. The real question is, will we honor that inheritance, or will we continue to pretend that our survival was ours alone? To embrace their shadow is to admit that humanity is not one story, but many. And sometimes the most powerful voices are the ones speaking quietly from within.
When scientists first uncovered Denisovan DNA, it was like stumbling into a hidden room of human history. But what if that room was not the last? In fact, recent studies suggest there are more shadows out there, ancestors we have never seen, never named, never even dug up, but who still whisper through our genes. These are the ghost lineages, humans who lived, loved, and died long ago, leaving behind no skeletons we can hold, no tools we can trace, only fragments of themselves hidden in us. One of the most intriguing pieces of evidence comes from genetic studies in Africa. In 2020, researchers analyzing the genomes of West African populations found signatures that didn't match Neanderthals, Denisovans, or any known Homo species. These signatures suggested that up to 19% of their DNA came from an unknown hominin, a ghost ancestor, possibly Homo heidelbergensis, or a cousin species we have not yet identified. Imagine that. Entire groups of people who once walked the earth, their stories untold, their faces unknown, yet their legacy still flowing in the veins of millions today. It is almost like a haunting. David Reich, in his book Who We Are and How We Got Here, 2018, describes these findings as footprints without owners, traces left in the sand by people we cannot yet see. And the deeper we look into our DNA, the more footprints we find. Some studies suggest that in Oceania, alongside Denisovan ancestry, there may be traces of yet another mysterious hominin, a cousin who might have lived on islands we have yet to excavate properly. It makes the story of humanity feel less like a single path and more like a tangled forest, full of trails that disappear into fog. If this is true, then the world was once crowded with kinds of humans we cannot even imagine. Think about it. When Homo sapiens first set out from Africa, the earth might have felt like a gathering place of many tribes. Neanderthals in Europe, Denisovans in Asia, and perhaps still others in Africa and Southeast Asia whose names we have lost. We were never alone. We were never singular. And maybe, just maybe, the faces we call ours today are masks worn by dozens of forgotten ancestors. The ghosts of humanity
do not linger in ruins or bones. They live inside us, in silence, waiting for science to hear them.
Close your eyes and imagine walking through the twilight of prehistory, when the Earth was home not to one humanity, but to many. The air is heavy with wood smoke, the ground damp beneath your feet, and somewhere in the distance you hear voices. Not Neanderthal, not Denisovan, not even the familiar cadence of sapiens, but something else. These are the ghost ancestors, people whose bodies we have never held, whose skulls we have never measured, but whose blood lingers inside us. What would they have looked like? Perhaps their brows were broad, like Neanderthals, yet their stature more slender, like sapiens. Maybe their skin carried shades we no longer see today, adapted to forests, rivers, and deserts now lost. Scientists cannot reconstruct them fully, but fragments of DNA offer hints. Genes that influence immunity, metabolism, and even height that don't match any known group. These are puzzle pieces without a picture. Anthropologist Chris Stringer, in The Origin of Our Species, 2011, reminds us that the human story is less a ladder and more a branching tree. That tree had branches we have not even named, species that might have thrived for millennia before fading into us. Imagine them building fires in Africa's ancient savannas, hunting antelope with stone-tipped spears, or singing around the night flames with voices we will never hear again. Picture others on remote islands of Southeast Asia, their bodies smaller or larger than ours, shaped by strange ecologies, watching the tides in ways no textbook can capture. These ghost humans were not mistakes. They were not failed versions of us. They were simply other answers to the question of how to live on this planet. And though their bones have crumbled beyond recognition, their essence survives in ourselves. Every time you fall ill and your immune system fights back, part of that defense may come from a forgotten people. Every time your body adapts to climate or altitude, a ghost may be guiding you still. To think of them this way is both eerie and comforting. Eerie because we walk among echoes of lives erased, and comforting because it means no life is ever truly lost. They are not shadows behind us. They are threads woven into us. They lived, they endured, they loved, and then instead of disappearing entirely, they became part of us. The ghosts may be nameless, but they are family, hidden in sight.
What does it mean to live with ghosts in our blood? It means that the human story is not finished, not neat, not the straight march we once imagined. Instead, it is a mosaic, a patchwork quilt sewn from countless threads. Some we recognize, like Neanderthals and Denisovans, and others still nameless, shadows glimpsed only in the code of our DNA. To carry these ghosts is to admit that humanity has never been singular. We are the outcome of meetings and minglings, of families that crossed boundaries, of species that shared not only the Earth, but their lives with each other. When geneticists find traces of unknown hominins in West African genomes, they're uncovering not just numbers or percentages, but relationships, marriages, children, alliances that happened long before our recorded history. As David Reich wrote in Who We Are and How We Got Here, 2018, every genome tells a story, and some of those stories come from voices we have yet to name. Imagine if tomorrow, in some hidden cave, archaeologists uncover bones that perfectly match those ghostly signatures in our DNA. Suddenly, a face we have never seen might emerge, a face that has lived inside us all along. How would we react? Would we call them alien or finally recognize them as kin? The truth is, they have already shaped us. Their genes are not curiosities. They influence how our bodies function, how our children grow, even how we resist disease. They are part of our survival toolkit, quietly guiding us through millennia. Perhaps the real haunting is not that they vanished, but that we forget to honor them. Picture a world once crowded with humans, different voices rising in the night, different hands shaping tools, different eyes watching the stars. All of them thought they were the center of their story. And yet, here we are, carrying their unfinished chapters within us. That realization is humbling. It reminds us that we are not the end of evolution's song, but one verse in a longer chorus. And somewhere out there, in uncharted caves, in unexcavated soils, in fossils yet to be lifted to the light, the faces of our ghost ancestors still wait. The question is, are we ready to meet them? And when we do, will we see strangers, or will we finally see ourselves?
Think of our species not as a straight line of winners, but as a tapestry woven from many human hands. Neanderthals, Denisovans, and other ghost ancestors are not footnotes to our story. They are threads that give the cloth its strength, color, and depth. The river of evolution braided, split, and rejoined, and we are the confluence. Genetics turned on the light. From Svante Pääbo's pioneering ancient DNA work described in Neanderthal Man, 2014, and later crowned by the 2022 Nobel Prize, to David Reich's synthesis in Who We Are and How We Got Here, 2018, the old picture of human destiny has been redrawn in living color. It is no longer a tale of a single triumphant species replacing dim cousins, but of meetings, borrowings, and unions that stitched resilience into our lineage. Imagine that resilience as a toolkit passed hand to hand across icy valleys and jungle nights, a breathing trick for high places, a keener immune sentry, a new way to chip stone, a story that binds a larger camp. When climate shifted or prey vanished, that kit mattered more than muscle. It is why our map today holds multitudes. Tibetan lungs shaped by Denisovan variants of EPAS1, Oceanian genomes carrying sizable Denisovan segments, Eurasian bodies still guarded by Neanderthal immune alleles. Even our minds bear the imprint of cooperation scaled through myth and language, the quiet technology that lets strangers move as one. Picture the world in which these ingredients were mixed. Glaciers scouring valleys, coastlines blooming with shellfish, grasslands ringing with hooves, islands laced with storms and stars. Across those spaces, different humans met in fear, in curiosity, in desire, in necessity. Sometimes they fought. Sometimes they fed one another. Sometimes they made children whose cells became crossroads where histories converged. If you breathe deeply now, drawing air into lungs that carry gifts from kin you never knew, you are participating in that convergence. Touch your wrist and feel a pulse built by more than sapiens alone. It is unfashionable to talk about kinship with the vanished, yet the science pulls us back toward family, toward a bigger idea of us. We inherit not only their genes, but their unfinished questions: how to live with difference, how to face change without breaking, how to carry fire forward without burning the world. Stand at the mirror and try an experiment. Look for a faint shadow over your shoulder, not a ghost come to haunt you, but a presence come to remind you that your reflection is collective. You are a chorus of ancestors learning at last to sing in harmony. And if that chorus feels larger than you expected, good. It means the story is larger too, wider, older, and wiser than the lonely myth of winners and losers. In that wider story, success is not purity, but partnership, not conquest, but connection. The legacy of many is a promise that we endure by sharing, by adapting, and by remembering the hands that steadied ours in the dark. If the past lives inside us, What obligations follow from that inheritance? The myth of purity collapses under the weight of the evidence. In its place stands a humbler truth. Mixture is our baseline, and cooperation our superpower. Ian Tattersall, in Masters of the Planet 2012, argues that imagination and flexibility, not brute force, secured our future, while Chris Stringer's The Origin of Our Species 2011 reminds us that our strength was never solitary but social. Those lessons do not belong under glass in a museum. They are tools for the present. Climate shocks still come. Diseases still leap across borders. Scarcity still tempts us toward small circles and sharp elbows. But the record of our shared prehistory says plainly that we prevail by widening the circle, by pooling risk, by swapping knowledge, by making strangers into allies. Consider how the braided ancestry revealed by David Reich 2018 reframes identity. It does not dilute dignity, it deepens it. If your blood carries echoes from many human kinds, then every act of empathy is, in a sense, a homecoming, and every flare of cruelty is a quarrel within a family. That perspective does not erase differences, it asks us to steward them. Diversity in bodies kept our ancestors alive across glaciers, coasts, and deserts. Diversity in ideas keeps their descendants nimble in storms of data and accelerating change. Walk through a city at dusk and notice how the lights come on in 1,000 colors and languages. The same pattern is humming under the skin, a lattice of inheritances, cross-braced by old gifts. If you have ever felt split between identities, take comfort. Being plural is the human condition. Jill Cook's Neanderthal, Life, Death, and Art 2013 shows care, ritual, and tenderness in Neanderthal communities. Recognizing that kinship does not diminish sapiens, it enlarges humanity. We can choose to treat the vanished as rivals beaten by history, or we can recognize them as benefactors whose endurance made ours possible. In practice, that choice shows up in small, ordinary acts. How we teach children where their strength came from, how we speak about us and them, how we respond to the fear that difference provokes. When you feel that fear, remember the Ice Age lesson. A camp facing night and cold survives by sharing fire, not by hoarding sparks. Our world is entering its own long night of complexities, climate instability, engineered biology, synthetic minds, where muscle will not save us. The blueprint that worked before still works now. Imagination to see farther, networks to act together, humility to learn fast, generosity to keep the circle intact. That is the ethical payload of the genome, a reminder that the line between self and other is thinner than it looks, and that our best future is a coalition, not a conquest. Honor the legacy of many by building ways to belong. Tell broader stories, design systems, and keep room at the fire. What saved us yesterday will save us tomorrow.
So close your eyes and return to the fire. Hear the wind comb the grass and the low hush of far herds beyond the ridge. Sparks lifting like small stars as the resin crackles. Gathered here are the many. Neanderthal hands resting on stone, Denisovan breath measured in thin mountain air, sapiens' eyes reflecting stories not yet told. One by one, the bodies dim, but the heat remains, traveling through time in a chain of warmth that reaches your chest. Place your palm there. Feel the heartbeat. That rhythm is the drumline of a tribe larger than you imagined. It keeps time with ancestors whose names you will never learn, yet whose gifts you already carry. Yuval Noah Harari, in Sapiens 2014,
writes that myths let large numbers of strangers cooperate. Perhaps the most important myth to retire is the myth of aloneness. We were never alone. We were always plural, and that plural self is our compass for what comes next. New winters are on the way. Ecological, technological, psychological. They will test our willingness to share fire, to broaden we, to build institutions sized for a species that remembers its relatives. Let the memory be practical. Teach children that their bodies are archives, that kindness honors kin they cannot name, that curiosity is a duty to the unborn. Design cities as camps that welcome different skills to the same circle. Tool makers, storytellers, healers, number lovers, star watchers. Make your daily life a small rehearsal for a bigger belonging. Look up, breathe slowly, listen for the quiet older than language, and leave space at the table for a stranger. If you do, you will feel the braided river moving beneath the floorboards, the old current that carried us through ice and darkness. The future will not be decided only by cleverness, but by the coalition we can hold together. And coalitions are built the ancient way, with patience, with shared work, with songs that remind us who we are. Before you sleep, picture the flame traveling from hand to hand, cave to cave, shore to shore, and then into the glow of your screen. It is the same flame, an inheritance of light. Guard it, grow it, pass it on. And as you drift, consider a final question. If we honor the legacy of many, can we become the kind of ancestors our descendants will want whispering in their blood? If this story keeps you company tonight, return for another and bring someone to the fire. There is always room, and the night is long, and the stars are listening. Remember, too, how the record humbles certainty. Caves still hide surprises, sediments keep secrets, and genomes open like books we are learning to read. Somewhere a fragment waits, a tooth or shard, ready to widen our family again. When it surfaces, let wonder lead, not fear. Greet the newcomer as a relative arriving late. Invite their story into yours, and adjust the circle so everyone can sit near the flame with care.